Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smile. Here in the studio today, the brand new studio, by the way, I have the incredible Patrick Kennedy. Now, for those of you who have been following the show and listening along since its inception, you'll recognize Patrick. He's a familiar face. In fact, PK was one of my guests very early on, in fact, episode 12, which feels like an absolute lifetime ago, and yet there is so much that's happened in such a short amount of time. And the most incredible part of all of that, PK, is that you're still sober. Wow. Like, I can't wait to dive into that. I think part of the reason I wanted to get you on the show today was because I think it's really important to not only share stories around the early days and the things that we need to do in our life to support our sobriety, but then it's like, what happens after that? What do we do once the desire to drink alcohol has been removed? How do you actually learn how to do life and face life's challenges sober? That's what I'm really passionate about talking about with people most. So I cannot wait to dive into this conversation today. Without any further delay, I'd love to welcome Patrick onto the show. Welcome back, Patrick. How are you?
Thank you, Ash. Good to be here again.
Yes.
I was here not long ago for your you had a little gathering.
We
and
did,
I was able to see the new place.
About 24 hours ago.
Amazing. But
so welcome back.
Good to be back. I was saying to you before we came on air, like, you've got a lot more stuff than when we first recorded. Like, you've got, this looks amazing down here. Like, this looks very high tech. It's good to have Frank here.
Frankie.
On my lap. But when you were talking then, you were like, oh, he's still sober. Isn't that incredible? I was like, yeah, that is quite incredible.
An absolute miracle.
Nuts. And I was talking to someone about this recently who we were chatting about, like, the concept of, like, time in recovery and how, you know, you can meet people and we know people that are like 30, 40 years sober, and that's obviously incredible. But then we also remember that once upon a time we were so physically and mentally dependent on alcohol that the concept of one day was unbelievable too.
It felt impossible.
Yeah, and so I was chatting to this guy and he said something like, oh, so you've been sober for what, almost 4 years? And it genuinely just, like, shocked me for a bit then, because I for the first time actually had genuine flashbacks about, as we say, what it was like, and that idea of 4 years. But if you had said to me then, hey, 1 month, I would have said that is unbelievable too. So, you know, it is, you're right, there's so much to unpack in recovery. I feel like we're always recovering from something.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's so much that I want to unpack even in that small sentence that you just shared. Coming up to, so I'm going to be 5 in February, and somebody told me once upon a time that at 5 years sober, you get given your marbles back, and at 10 years, you learn how to play with them. And I just think that's so perfect, because one thing that I love about my own journey in recovery has been that it's like this unveiling and these layers that continue to peel back. And if you had asked me at a year sober, like, hey, Ash, how are you going? I would have thought that I had figured out every single problem there was in the world, because I had all of this clarity. I was on fire, you know, and I definitely experienced that pink cloud that you hear people talk about for a period of time. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, she was crazy. Like, it's so funny how, and I just know that in another 5 years, I'm going to look back at this conversation and be like, yep, you were nuts.
There's a part of us at the beginning that thinks we're sober now and it's just up and up and up and up and up and up and up. And it's, and the good days are going to be always good. And if not, they'll be even better. And I thought that too. I was like, oh, this is unbelievable. I can do everything. Everything is at my fingertips. I barely even want to sleep. I'm so excited to do what's next. And then, as to your point, some time went by, and particularly this year, I've been reminded that actually one of the reasons I got sober was to live in reality again. And reality isn't up and up and up and up. Reality is the life events that can sometimes be really challenging and can emotionally be very difficult to deal with. And I'd say, like, particularly in the last year, I've had those moments where I literally said to myself, oh, this is why you drank. This right here, this feeling you're having right now is why you drank. And they're not particularly comfortable experiences to be having, but it has never been, and people often will say it's not a linear journey, and that you'll feel better and then you'll feel worse, and then you might even feel better again after that, and then you'll feel a sense of stability, and then maybe you'll feel bad. It's all we've given ourselves is a reprieve, I guess, from the insanity that drinking gave us, but we haven't got a reprieve from the normal realities of life.
Yeah, exactly right. And the thinking that often comes along with somebody who has the personality type that you and I have, who are searching for things outside of ourselves to numb and ease the discomfort of everyday life. And you've had a really challenging year. And, with your permission, we're going to dive into that in a little bit more in a moment. But just for people who may not have heard your first episode, let's allow them to get to know you a little bit better. So I'd love to kick it off with, what does an average day look like, and what do you do for fun?
Well, my average day at the moment is only something that has come about very, very recently, and we can chat about it a little bit more. But I go to the gym now. Have you ever heard of these places? So
I am familiar.
So these places, you go in, you pay them money, and you go in there, and there's weights, and there's trainers who are all very positive, happy people, and they're very attractive and fit. And so I go into this gym thing at very early in the morning, and I do all sorts of exercises, and my body at the moment is just like on fire with pain. But everyone always was talking about going to the gym as though it was like some great thing to do, and I just never gave it any consideration. Anyway, I've started going, and lo and behold, I feel like amazing mentally. Like I've had this incredible shift mentally. And I've said to some of my friends in recovery, I've said, I really hope, fingers crossed, that I can get my first ever healthy addiction. Like every addiction I've had has been
destructive.
To my detriment. And I often hear people talking about, I'm addicted to going to the gym, and I'm thinking, that's bullshit. I can't imagine. But I get it now, because just this morning, it was like 6:30. Every part of me did not want to get out of bed for this 7 a.m. thing, and I found myself going. And I know you'll be able to identify with this. When we drank, every part of us didn't want to drink, and we found a way to drink. So part of me is sort of seeing that shift that I'm very glad of. So I start the day at the gym. I'm on holidays at the moment, so I've been able to get to a lot of different meetings, which has been great. And I was probably doing three a week when it was working, but now it's like almost every day. Like I'm going. I was at this thing with you yesterday with some of our friends in recovery, and like I said to you after, like I was as high as a kite after that event, and I was trying to work out, why was I so like elevated after that experience. And I think it like dawned on me how like that this stuff was not accessible to me when I drank, like hanging out with people sober, not necessarily feeling like I was having the time of my life, but also like not wanting to leave either. Like being very happy to stay right there. And I was just like, that is, I did get a reminder of how far I've come in recovery. And so, yeah, look, I love seeing people now.
It's that genuine, authentic connection, isn't it? And similar to what you were saying before, it's not high. It's just consistent. That's what I find when I hang out with other sober people, is we can have belly laughs that cause tummy aches, but we can also have these like seriously deep conversations, but they also don't need to be heavy.
No.
I think there's a difference there, and we're not trying to rescue each other, which I think is really powerful. I think a lot of the time as a society, we bring our stuff to other people, and the other person wants to fix it and solve it because they want to help, but sometimes it's just nice to be able to share and have space held.
And I think with I'm taking the example of yesterday, like I was in that room and I was thinking to myself, there's not one person here that's being slightly more or slightly less than who they are.
Yeah.
Like I can't get, and you don't get any sense of that.
And there's no fighting for airtime.
No.
Yeah.
In fact, there were times yesterday when it was just silent, and I still was a bit like, someone's got to say something here. Like I was like,
I'm like that too.
I was like, someone's got to say something. But then you kind of look around and everyone's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And like, so I've particularly this last year, I found myself wanting to be more accessible to people, because I've found that is good for me. A lovely thing I've been hearing from people in the rooms lately was this idea of how we never thought we were people, like I was a people person, and that wasn't me. And then I think as we get into recovery and some time goes by, maybe I actually am a people person, and maybe that is actually good for me, and I can find that connection. And so that's been coming up a bit. I've started reading a bit. I've started, it's just I think this year has been about challenging myself with a few things. You know, like I was joking about the gym, obviously, but like the gym part was this great fear of mine, of the idea of walking into a gym and exercising in front of people. Like that gave me so much anxiety.
Where did that come from? Where did the fear and the anxiety come from?
Well, I would look at those sort of spaces as being like exclusively held by people who didn't look like me. And when I say that, I mean like I was saying this to someone today, like I still have this very, very altered perception of how I actually look. And I think whether you call it sort of body image issues or things like that, but like I think I'm smaller than I am. I think I have more weight than I do. Like, and I have all these sort of internal ideas of how I look. And so I kind of instinctively go, well, you don't belong in a gym. You can't be in a gym because you're not worthy enough to be in that environment. And but you know, I toddle in there now, and I just don't look at it the same way anymore because there's all shapes and sizes there. There's all people at different levels.
Of course.
You know, the trainers are very supportive. Like I see so many parallels between the health and fitness journey and recovery. Even one of the trainers stopped short just of saying, "Oh, keep coming back." Like he literally was like, "If you keep coming back consistently, this will become habit and this will become part of your life that you'll look to enjoy." So yeah.
That's awesome. You know, I often have similar conversations with people. I don't think that you're alone at all in those feelings of, I'm not one of the pretty people who goes to a space like that. And I often hear people say that when I invite people to come to the yoga studio that I work at. And they're like, oh no, only beautiful people work there or train there. And I'm thinking that's just not the case at all. But I really understand, because I've had those thoughts myself in other times in my life where it's like I don't belong. And so you talk yourself out of it to keep yourself safe. What was that moment, that trigger that allowed you to push through the doubt and step through the doors?
It's the same thing that does it all the time, in that I get into enough pain and discomfort, and I'd spent a good chunk of this year, like I had a relationship breakdown, and that kind of fueled a lot of old insecurities about myself, and I was stuck on those for a period of time. And I met someone in the program who was going to this particular gym, and she like wouldn't shut up about it, which was fine. But she was really enthusiastic, and eventually I just sort of thought to myself, well, I can't keep complaining or bemoaning about the same stuff and not do anything about it. It was the same with my drinking. It was the same with my mental health. It was the same with any of the past really serious challenges that I had, is that nothing will change if nothing changes. And so, and it was also a bit of the kind of, like I sort of spoke to my sponsor about it, and it's also just taking a lot of the drama out of it. What are we talking about here? We're talking about you walking into a gym. It's a group session. You like you're paying them. I think someone said to me, you're actually paying them. They're there to look after you. They want you to succeed. There's not one, and a bit like we often say, people are often just thinking about themselves anyway.
100%.
They're doing their own exercises. So I went to one session, and it was like that old sort of test out the water, see if it's okay, and then when you realise it's safe, you can go back in again. And so, and that kind of lit the fuse. And as I said, I felt the benefits. I felt better mentally, started to feel a bit stronger, and I just want to keep going back now. So sometimes I think we've found in recovery that the best thing to do is just to do the thing that you're putting off, test out water and see what it's like, and then you do it, and then, you know, maybe you won't keep going back, but it won't be because there's this paralyzing fear not to go back.
Yeah, that's so. What about, what do you do for fun now? Because actually I've got two questions. I want to know what you do for fun, but this may also tie into this second question that I have. You just mentioned that you're going to meetings pretty much every day at the moment, and we're talking about 12-step meetings. You're almost 4 years sober. Why are you going every day? I feel like that's a thought that must be going through some people's head. Like, why do you need to be going every day?
The thought that I had when I first came, people would say, I'm 10 years sober. I said, what the fuck are you still doing here? Like, didn't you get your certificate and fuck off and now you can just live in the world and you don't have to be part of all these freaks in AA? No, look, the reality is, and this has been another thing that I've realised in the last year, that my I have two families. I have my family of my parents, my sister, my brother-in-law, my nieces, but I have a family in AA that is as strong, and in some respects sometimes stronger. And I see myself as someone who's now has been given such a great opportunity to live life in AA that I want to give more to AA, and I can't give. I mean, I can run my program outside of meetings, but meetings is where you meet the lifeblood of the program, which are the newcomers. You don't meet newcomers if you're not doing lots of meetings. So the other thing that's probably changed in the last year is I'm sponsoring. I don't think I was sponsoring when we last chatted. I think I was still procrastinating my step 4, but now I sponsor four different guys from 4 very different walks of life. So I mean, it's just kind of been one of those things that I thought, no, this is the time to invest more in this program that's given you so much. And I think to that question about why would you go if you've maintained a level of or a period of sobriety, and that, well, I'm sober from alcohol, but as I've been reminded more and more this last year, I'm not emotionally sober in the way that I would like to be. And there's a very big difference between not drinking and being emotionally sober.
Okay, PK, what's the difference?
Well, fuck. I mean, the difference is that when so my last probably big life event that was challenging was a relationship breakup, and I didn't want to drink, which was amazing, but at the same time I felt totally not myself anymore, and for a good 3 or 4 months, on the surface you could say, oh, he's sober because he's not drinking, but the way I was feeling and the way I was acting and the way I was thinking about life, I'd almost would have said to myself, why don't you just drink then? Like, what's the difference here between how you were prior to coming in AA and how you are now? Okay, there's minus the alcohol, and that's great, so we don't get more destructive. But how I'm actually being in the world, I wouldn't call it emotionally sober. And I remember talking to my sponsor, and I was, just complaining. And he basically, said to me, what are you doing about any of this? Like, are you seeking out real honest connection with other people? Are you helping other people? Are you isolating? Are you doing what's comfortable? Basically. And the great irony for people in recovery is that when they do what's comfortable, they become very uncomfortable when they do it. And so when I went into, I'm going to isolate, I'm going to start gossiping about people, I'm going to start living in resentment, I quickly found more discomfort and more pain. And I started to have more surface level conversations with people. I started to, it just wasn't a particularly great energy to be around, and so that's the difference. I might not have been drinking, but I wasn't exactly as Bill Wilson, who founded AA, would say, I wasn't really being a citizen of the world either. So it's like, what was the point of my recovery if I'm not actually being in the world, in that way?
And I imagine that if you spend enough time in that feeling, then it's very likely that you will drink again. Because I think one of the great things that's happened for me in my recovery, and I think you're quite similar, is that my threshold or my tolerance for discomfort now is so low. Like, I used to live in a world where I was perpetually uncomfortable. Like, I was constantly hungover. I was always in a fight or an argument with someone. I thought very little of myself. And so just, kind of just like things didn't really affect me that much. Whereas now, I can't behave badly anymore without feeling seriously uncomfortable. I can't lie anymore and get away with it. And that's because of this recovery program that I live by and the principles. But I'm very lucky because it means that when I do, as my sponsor would say, fall off the beam, I get back on pretty quickly because I just don't like to sit in it for that long. So what were some of the things that you did to sort of pull yourself out of that rut? And I know that it also even the healing of this relationship hasn't been linear for you, right? You've had periods where you felt really good, and then you've shared with me that you've kind of gone a few steps back. Like, what does that all look like?
So in terms of the first question about pulling myself back out of it, it was to actually start finding that baseline level of gratitude again. So, okay, I'd lost something that was important to me. I'd lost a bit of the intimacy and the some shared experiences, and I'm not great when it comes to just moving on. I've found that with a lot of things. I can't just switch gears. And so even though I can move on in respect of putting my shoes on, putting my clothes on, walking out the door, I can do that. But in terms of I can still carry around a lot of the emotional weight of stuff, and social media does not help either. And so that was really challenging. But my sponsor said, look, find your baseline level of gratitude. What do you have today that you didn't have 3.5 years ago? And so it was to start reconnecting with, okay, well, what did I actually do this for to begin with? I didn't get sober because I wanted to have a relationship. I didn't get sober because I wanted something, or I got sober because I just wanted to live as the most
you didn't want to die.
Yeah. And so that was, okay, so today what do I have? I have my breath. I have oxygen in my body. I can live. I have choices to make. I'm free of the genuine crippling insanity of addiction. Okay, so it was sort of starting to reconnect with that on a daily basis, and then it was meetings. It was putting myself in the company of people that had walked the same road as me, maybe several times, and at the same time also putting myself in front of the person who had been sober for 16 hours. They're at their first meeting, and their whole world was literally just crumbling on top of them. And I often hear, and it's one of the truest things I hear, is that when you can be there in the service of someone else's problems and issues, yours will generally die of neglect. And the things that you're carrying around, they might not disappear. They won't be like a vanishing act, but they will just right size a little bit. And so then it went from, I've had a breakup, to, you had a breakup.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like, okay, you had a breakup. People have them. It might not have worked out, okay, but there'll be more. It's like your appetite. Like your appetite's done. There'll be another one. There'll be another opportunity. What I needed to understand was that by virtue of being sober, I'm in the ball game, and I'll get another opportunity. I'll get another crack at this. It might not look the same. It might not even make me feel the same, but there will be more to be revealed. But there won't be if I continue to isolate and continue to withdraw back into myself, because as you said, then a drink isn't so far away at that point.
And I think that is a reflection of emotional sobriety, is having the calmness around what's truly meant for me will never pass me by, and tying that into your faith. One thing as well that I really observed, PK, around that period of time for you was just how open you were. And you would share about it, and you reached out to me, we caught up and went for a walk, and like you connected with people who you knew you could have these conversations with, rather than sitting at home isolating all alone, doom scrolling on social media. Like, I'm sure there may have been a period there, like we all do it, but you took action. You got off your ass, and you were like, hey, like, I need some help here, and you sort that out in whatever way felt right for you. And you gave breathwork a try as well, didn't you?
Yeah, breathwork a try. So I couldn't even get the words out. I was getting so emotional about the experience, Ash.
Tell me, I love a good breathwork story.
Oh, it was at the Breath House, which is, I feel like that. I mean, there's lots of places to do breathwork, but I feel like that one in particular has just caught fire.
Yeah.
And it's not far from where I live, and I went there, and my sponsor loves it. Like, he is a big advocate. And so I just went in there completely open-minded, and found myself like just in tears at the end of it. And I must admit, I probably neglected the practice, and I would love to go back. But what amazed me about the experience was just like, it just kind of it kind of just searched every single part of my consciousness, subconsciousness, and I don't think I had really cried for like ages. I can't even remember the last time I cried before that, but probably when I was in rehab. And then as the time went on, I just started to really focus in on some stuff. There was, gratitude practice towards the end, and lots of affirmations throughout. They didn't say to do that, but I think I was sort of telling myself, it was the same stuff that I did right back when I was really struggling with alcoholism, and it was that you're enough. Today you are enough. You just, I promise you are enough. And I was sort of saying that to myself a lot, and amazing experience. I'd absolutely, for people that are listening to this and are looking for ways to help with organising their thoughts or their feelings, it is certainly a very powerful tool to be able to do that.
Just a sidebar, I don't know if you guys can hear Frank snoring, if the mic's picking it up or not, but
Very
if you
relaxed.
can hear a subtle hum in the background, that's just Frankie snoring on PK's lap.
The best life, this dog.
Literally,
The
he
best
does.
life.
So PK, we should probably get to that point in the show where we talk about the photo that you've brought in today. Now, you sent me a photo from a time in your life where you were hiding behind a smile. Now, this photo is not from your drinking days.
That was particularly audible, that snore.
Frankie.
Do you want me to put him down?
No, it's okay. Tell me what was going on for you at this time, because you weren't in your drinking, you were 3.5 years sober, and yet you were still putting on a smile to move through a really difficult time.
When you said to me that you're going to do this again and the format and things like that, the first thing I thought was, well, how can someone do that when they're in recovery? Because aren't those days behind us now? And then I remembered, I thought, no, actually they're not behind you. You've got a photo, you've got several that you can think of, because I still work. So since we last spoke, my business has grown quite a bit, and which is great.
Which is PK's Pack.
PK's Pack Dog Walking, and there was an event in St Kilda called Dog Fest or Pet Fest, and it was like the first one, huge event, and it was right in the O'Donnell Gardens, like just off Ackland Street, and it was just humming with people, and I had a stall, and so it was a huge week leading up to it, because I was just like trying to organise so much different stuff. I was like trying to organise merch and lots of printing and banners and all sorts of stuff, and I barely had any time to really. Anyway, as the week unfolded and we got closer to the date, and I'm still organising everything, that's when the relationship ended, and it literally ended the night before the event. There's just like there's no timing these things, unfortunately.
Goodness.
You can never really put off these things. So the relationship ended, and then and I remember the Friday night I was like at my ex's place, and I was like cleaning out all this stuff, and I was just doing all this, and I was just like as I said before, I can't remember the last time I cried. Well, I was crying that night. I was absolutely like in a state, and I was got all my stuff, and I went home, and then I got ready for this thing. And then as we went to the event, it dawned on me that this is one of those events where you need to be on like every second, not necessarily because you might miss the potential client, but it's because it's that sort of event. It's like
Totally. And you're representing your business and your brand, and
I've got a friend who is a very good photographer, and he has a photography business, and he was coming to do photos, and it was just the event where it was like big smiles, lots of fake chat, lots of pretending that people have the most amazing dog I've ever seen, even though it was probably just a dog. But it was a lot of that, really.
Because Frank is the most amazing dog.
And correct. And so when I was doing all this, and I was like, and at the time I remember thinking, shit, I haven't done this for ages. I haven't done this thing of pretending to be a certain way when I'm actually not. Like it had been a long time since I'd been.
Since your political days.
Yeah, and I was like, this is so phony.
Yeah.
And I not to be melodramatic, but inside I am like, I don't even know what's going on. I'm so sad, and I'm so fearful of my future all of a sudden. because whether we like it or not, relationship breakdowns. I mean, I admire anyone who can go through one and look at it for what it is and move on. And there's people that can do that. I cannot, because the relationship breakdown to me was, one, the relationship is over and that's sad, but it also felt like very close to home about things that I was already insecure about. And it was almost like magnifying those things. And that's where my head went, you know, that those feelings of not being worthy and not being enough, and have I failed in this area? And so it was the mental overthinking, analysis paralysis of the whole thing. And at the same time, I'm smiling and doing this stuff. And so the photo that, you know, you'll share with your listeners and everything, it was just, yeah, I just look at it, I'm thinking, yeah, like great on the surface and doing the right thing, but inside, like never more confused and feeling a real sense of loneliness at that point.
Yeah. For those of you that are watching this episode on YouTube or Spotify, I'll flash up the photo now so that you can see the photo that we're talking about. I totally, oh my gosh, my heart breaks for you in that moment, because heartbreak is so painful. And for me, you know, when I separated from my husband, and I'm not sure if I've told this story before on the podcast, but we separated at the beginning of 2021, and I was stuck in Sydney because the borders had closed, and my brother was getting married to my best friend in Melbourne, and I couldn't get back. And so I had to watch the wedding on my phone. My dad was like, had me on FaceTime. And I remember I was at one of my other best friend's houses. He was with me the whole day because I knew that I was going to be really vulnerable that day, because not only was I separating from my husband, but then I was then watching my brother get married, and like the two of them at the same time was just so painful. Because to your point, I think a lot of the time, yes, we're grieving the loss of the relationship, but there is also this like swell of fear that comes in, because you're like, fuck, I'm going to die alone. Like, this is it, you know? And it's so scary to face. And I think one thing that's really helped me in those moments when I have those groundswells of fear now in other areas of my life is my faith. I'd love to know, like, how has your relationship with God, higher power, faith, how has that held you in this period and in this last year of your recovery?
Well, it's because it had to. It has absolutely grown, and the experience with that has grown directly as a result of having that experience. Because anyone who comes into 12-step, I honestly think this is universal. It's even if they haven't had a terrible experience with religion or spirituality, there's just an element of, oh, I'm not sure about that. I mean, yes, I'm desperate, but I'm not that desperate. Like there's always the camp of people who are like, I'll go to any lengths, but I will not believe in God. And that was absolutely my approach. I was thinking, oh, look, I'm just a hopeless alcoholic. I don't need to believe in God. I mean, that's a bit of a stretch. And so that was my approach. And then I got through the first year and I was happy. And so I don't even need to think about God or spirituality because I've got this. And then the second year was even better. And then the third year was going along great. And then I had this moment that I just described, and it was a reminder of you cannot predict and control outcomes around you. And even the things that were feeling really great and made you feel so full, they can go at the blink of an eye. And so what do you have then to fill that space? Because I feel things deeply. I can't exit a relationship and just get into a new one like I'm replacing an empty carton of milk. Like it's so in that time when there's that space to feel things and to go through, who is actually holding you at that point? And that's when I really had to start. And as my sponsor said, you know, unfortunately, it's got to be the G word. Like where is your spiritual life in all this? Where are we with that? Because you know, there's lots of ways to get sober, but the way that has worked for me happens to be part of a spiritual program. And so this experience, I started to lean into thinking more about what is out there? Where can I place my faith in? Because, like I described in those months that followed, and I talked about emotional sobriety. Well, that was me and my self-will. So me and my self-will was to isolate, to disconnect from people, and to do things that were not of benefit to me. And what became clear to me then is that my best thinking or just my thinking doesn't necessarily have my back and doesn't have my best interests at heart. And so I had to start leaning on other people and having faith in what I heard in others. So, in answer to your question, where is God in all this? Well, God is in the people that don't have a dog in the race, but will give me the guidance and advice to steer me to somewhere safe. And so, it's certainly taken on, and I've got no doubt that as time will go on, that will continue to evolve. And I know this because I hear people talk about, in their fourth year, and you talked about getting your marbles back and all that sort of stuff. But I've heard people say in their sixth year, they said, I'm getting closer to God this year. And so, like with a lot of stuff, I can't necessarily see it, and I can't say for sure what it is, but I know that it's happening because of what I hear and from what I have faith in. That something's going to have my back, because a lot of the time I don't. Like I just don't. Like my instinct back in not that long ago in a timeline of things, my instinct when things got tough was to drink, and then and my instinct after I drank was to keep drinking, and then when things got so bad as a result of my drinking, my next instinct was to keep drinking again. So there's a lot of evidence that my best thinking usually doesn't actually have my best interests at heart, and I've got to be prepared to open myself up to other experiences.
Where do you think the line is? This is something that I ponder with myself at the moment. You spoke about then that my best thinking, I often hear my best thinking got me into AA, or my best thinking got me into rehab, so I know that I can't trust my thinking. And that's why, the program that we're both in, having sponsorship, having people that you can go to talk to, or whether it's a coach or a mentor or anyone in your life that you can run your thinking by, I think that's really powerful. But at what point do you ever get to where you can trust your own thinking? Like, it's something that because I feel like I'm a lot, I think it's because, as I talk this out loud, because I have spent the last 4 years really deepening my spiritual practices through yoga and meditation, and more recently the breathwork space, I feel like I have such a clear channel to my intuition. But, I was chatting to my sponsor about this the other day, and she said, yeah, you know what, Ash, I get that. I hear you. But your intuition and your alcoholism can sometimes sound really similar. And I was like, God damn it.
Whenever sponsors start a sentence with "I hear you" and I get that, and I think that's great, and I understand you're having that experience. Whenever they preface it, I know I'm about to be told something that is the direct opposite of what I've thought to be true.
Yes.
But
they've been there, which is why
exactly.
They've got the empathy and the compassion and the understanding.
Like I correct, and I trust my thinking as much as. So I think the answer is, like, once upon a time, I had opinions, and I thought those opinions were really important, and it was like, that's my opinion. I mean, it's like, I don't know if you ever read the play The Crucible, but there's this guy called John Proctor, and he anyway, this is such a obscure reference, but I'm going to go with it. Yeah. But he basically went into this real huff. He goes, "This is my name. It's my name." That was like how I felt with my opinions, but it's my opinion, and so I was really like. I thought it was so important to get that across. And then as I came into recovery and I got sober, and the shit between my ears started to clear out, and I started to realize that, okay, maybe my opinions aren't that important, and maybe, God forbid, I might even have the wrong opinions, in the sense that maybe I actually don't know a lot of what I'm talking about. And so, but as time has gone on, I've started to learn how my past thinking and behavior led me in a certain way. And so how do I trust my thinking today I have a level of self-awareness today that I don't just see something and assume something and then that's the end of the conversation. Like, there's more. Like, I was talking to you. So yesterday is a great example. Like, at your thing, there's there was a few men there, older men. And so I walk into that space, and there's this part of me that instinctively goes, okay, older men, you need to act and be a certain way here. And that is like an ingrained part of me that I'm constantly working on.
Where does it come from?
Oh, it's just fear around older men and
Fear that you're not good enough, that you need to impress them.
Not up to it. And I can't even pinpoint how that feels, but I just know it's a very small part of me that just ticks away. And so I acknowledge that, and I go, yeah, but that's not true. And so the difference is that now I can acknowledge certain thoughts, and I can put it through the rigor of my own recovery. And a lot of the time it won't stand up to the rigor of my recovery because, in the 12 steps, I was able to put on paper literally all the people in my life that I was resentful towards. And that's not something that everyone does. It's something that people in addiction that have drank and used drugs because they were so at war with themselves is essentially what resentments are. It's being at war with self because these people are sleeping perfectly at night. So because I've done that, I can go, you have nothing to fear here. These are good people. They don't mean you any harm. Now, this sounds a bit ridiculous, but this is what goes on in my head because I have to go to myself, you're safe here. There's not one person here who's expecting you to be anything other than yourself. And so I can trust that thinking because that thinking has gone through the rigor of my own recovery, the 12 steps that I believe in and practice. But sometimes I will just seek out comfort because there's still a huge part of me that wants to be comfortable. So when we're talking about the breakup, it's not a small part going, hey, I reckon you should isolate, disconnect, don't return calls, give your sponsees the bare minimum, maybe miss a few meetings and engage in behavior that is not actually going to help you. That's not just a small part. That is literally all consuming.
Screaming.
Because at that point, I'm like, all I want is comfort. I don't want introspection. I don't want to self-reflect. I don't want to do the work. I don't want to put any of that thinking through the rigor of recovery. So I'll just accept that is what is. And then I get to that point of being in so much pain and discomfort that I pick up that really heavy phone, talk to my sponsor, and then I get that advice. And then when I get that advice, I hear it from someone who, again, is an arm's length away, has been through what I've been through, and also in a very compassionate way, doesn't actually care about what I do next. And that's really important because he would say to me, mate, it literally says it in our literature, go to the next bar room, have another drink if you want. If you think that's what's going to help you, well then go for it. It's not my recovery, it's not my sobriety. Yeah. And I needed to hear that sometimes.
You make such a good point there. I think good sponsorship is really allowing people to be in their messiness, and it's like, here's the way, I can show you the way, but I'm not going to drag you down the path. Like, you've got to get yourself up and you've got to be willing to walk that path.
Yeah, and then I think when you do go through it and then you get that relief and then you get so I take yesterday as a great example, and all of a sudden I get through that little bump of, oh shit, got to be on. And then I realize I don't have to be on. And then I'm having conversations with these different people. And then there's a part of me that goes, there you go. Like that's that connection. This is why you got sober. To have what you're having right now is that connection. No one's being anything other than themselves, and you're being able to be present and available in that situation. And that's why I said that I left your place. I'm thinking this is why I did it. Because there's no running away, there's no hiding. Now those thoughts of inferiority and insecurity, they will come up again. They might come up again later today. They might come up against, who knows, I'll be in the gym tomorrow and there could be a guy that's slightly bigger than me. And I could go to myself, oh my God, I can't compete with this guy. And then my recovery will kick in and go, mate, there's no competition here. So just get on with it. And then, and you'll have the same experience.
Yeah. Another thing that you've done quite recently is join a men's group. Has this been part of your effort to work on the fear stuff around men?
Definitely, almost, 100%. It was the same thing as the gym thing. I was like, you can't keep saying that men's groups aren't for you and that you're not comfortable and this and that, because I need to work out that for myself. So I'd been to 2 men's group meetings in the past, and that was because I was sharing at the meeting. And I think I even said in the shares, oh yeah, I'll come back, but I was talking shit. I was like, I'm never coming back this again. This is an awful experience. All these men who, and again, check my thinking. What's coming from these thoughts? Could it possibly be that you don't like being in a room of men who have been sober longer than you? And that goes right at the heart of ego. Is this actually, are they acting in a way that is intimidating? Are you actually in fear, or do you feel less seen because there is so much more sobriety and experience and recovery? And is there a part of you that thinks that because you're a few years in, you've stopped learning? Do you not think that you still need to be? So it was a lot of stuff, and I eventually just said, right, I'll just join one and I'll work it out for myself. And I was having a chat to your fiance about it, and I said to him, I walked into this meeting tonight and I did not feel one sense of anxiety or fear. I sat down, I was asked to share, I shared, and then I stood around and talked to a lot of them at the end of the meeting, and the experience was just the complete opposite of what I had 2 years ago when I was last there. And as someone pointed out to me, like, that is recovery, to have the same experience and a completely different perspective. That is, in essence, what recovery is all about.
It's that total shift in perspective. Yeah, I was actually at a meeting last night and we were sharing about that exact thing. It's at our core, we fundamentally change the way that we see the world. That's what living in recovery is. PK, we are nearing towards the end of this conversation, and there's 2 more questions that I want to ask you. Now, the first one is, knowing what you know now, if you could go back to Patrick at 6 months sober, what would you tell him?
Oh my God.
Apart from buckle up, buddy.
And the thing is, what you said at the start of this thing is that at 6 months sober, I thought I was killing it. Like, at 6 months sober, I was, oh my God. I think what I would say is enjoy it, because this whole pink cloud thing and I think it's really important that when people get sober and to not dismiss the pink cloud, enjoy it. And because you never know, that pink cloud might actually last far longer than you expect. And I think sometimes I meet newcomers who go, oh yeah, but the pink cloud's going to be over soon. I said, but it might not be. You might feel like this your entire recovery, and good for you. So, but I think at 6 months, I needed to probably just tell myself that, it's keep being available to listen to people and to keep listening to people, because it is the most important skill I've learnt to this point, is just being able to listen to other people. Because if I am truly listening to someone else, it's kind of like myself is out of the way, and all my own ideas, and because the most growth I've had has not been because I've thought of a great idea, it's because someone else has given me a great idea, and someone else has given me the option to pursue something. Like, how often do we hear people say, oh yeah, I've got sober, and there's been a lot of hard work, but I've also felt like I've just listened. Sometimes it can be that simple. I've just been prepared to listen, and that at 6 months, because I don't think it's 6 months. I was basically sponsoring people without having done the steps, because I was like, oh, look, follow me, young grasshopper. I'll show you the way. And, I'm 6 months. Oh, mate, I've been through hell and back. But I think the most important thing, particularly in these last few months when things got really hairy, was just to listen and accept the advice I was given and just park my own shit. Because like I said, like, my own stuff was telling me to, oh, mate, don't take this so seriously. Just isolate and do all this. I'm thinking, fuck, it's not gonna give me the relief. And time again, the thing that has brought me relief has just been to shut up, listen, and do what I'm told. Yeah. And that's it.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, last question. PK, what are your 3 non-negotiables today? So they'll be different from last time. What are your 3 non-negotiables that allow you to live happy, authentic, and free?
Happy, authentic, and free. the honesty of, righto, Frank.
He's come back to mama.
That is very disappointing, Frank. I thought we had something there. Yeah, honesty. The honesty thing is, I think, is for all of them, because it completely removes the fear and the anxiety around the day-to-day. So I think it was, I'm going to fuck this up. I think it was Mark Twain who said, you don't have to remember what you said if you're just living in a state of being honest. And there's something that's very freeing about that. Like, so the honesty part is really important. Honesty in my relationships. You know, I mentioned sponsorship. It's that element of being completely at the help and support of someone else and investing the time in other people has been has been massive for me this year. And some people are just like, when you tell people, normal people, about how this whole thing works, you know, you invest hours and hours and hours listening to someone share this stuff, and there's no money, it's just, and it is time. Like, and you would know this, you sponsor lots of women, like you have to invest time to sponsor, and you have to listen to people's problems and concerns and answer questions and do the work with them. And that's an emotional investment that can be really challenging to balance that with your life. Like, I was having this chat with my sponsor recently. I said, how many's too many sponsees? I've got 4. And he goes, 4's more than most, but it's not the most. Some people have more. But basically, you got to know that for each of those people, you can dedicate some emotional bandwidth and be able to be the sponsor they need. But I absolutely love it. Like, it is so rewarding. It's not always enjoyable. Like, sometimes it's a grind because you just want to shake them and go, feel like me, think like me, and be as desperate as I was in your position. But some people aren't there, and you've got to have that patience. So it's a bit of a slow burn. And then, service. And then the other thing is to just, I don't know, I just think, for me personally, it's just to not take things so bloody seriously all the time, and to be able to move on from things, even if they prick away at my ego or my sense of what's right or wrong. I think it's actually your brother who said, because I know your brother and your dad, and I remember like your dad was sharing about something, and he goes, it's like my son says, you know, is the juice worth the squeeze? And I heard that and I thought, fuck, that's a good one, because I think sometimes I will spend time on something, and then I got to stop and go, what am I doing this for? Is this because you have a real sense of justice and what's right, or do you need to be right? Yeah. Like, do you just need to be right? And sometimes I don't. So yeah, it's just picking your battles, and investing time in the people that love you and support you, and doing the things that matter.
Beautiful. What a great way to end. Hey, PK, thank you so much for coming back and returning to the show.
Pleasure.
And sharing so openly and honestly on this podcast. I think that people are going to take a lot from this conversation today, and I can't wait to have you back again further down the track. If people want to track you down, find out a little bit more about PK's packs, where should they go? So Instagram is the best, PKS_pack. Awesome. But yeah, if you've got a dog, I'd love to meet them and you. But no, thank you, Ash. I'm so glad you brought this back. I was thinking, gosh, why did she get rid of that? And I know.
That's good.
I know. I was like, it's crazy. I missed it so much. I was like, it has to come back. I got to listen.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for having me.
My absolute pleasure. I'm going to make sure that I pop all that info in the episode show notes. We say here on the show that when we recover loudly, no one needs to suffer in silence. So thank you so much for being here today.